Hey everyone, welcome back to another chapter book read-along of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and we are reading the beautiful illustrated copy by John Rocco. Now, we are right at the beginning of our hero's journey. They have finally made it past New York and are ready to go. Let's see what comes next. But first, if you're watching this with someone, pause the video and talk about some of your favorite things that have happened so far in the book. What you've remembered, some of your favorite characters, and then comes my quick 1 sentence per chapter review. Okay, maybe it's 2 sentences, but it's quick. Percy Jackson is our main hero. He got in trouble on a school field trip, and his math teacher, who he got in trouble with, Mrs. Dodds, turned out to be a monster. She grew wings, she grew talons, her eyes glowed. It was terrifying. But his other teacher, Mr. Brunner, tossed him a sword, and Percy defeated her. Percy and Grover, his best friend, see 3 old ladies on their way to New York City knitting giant socks. They snip a cord and look right at Percy. Ooh. Percy's mom is Sally, and she is awesome. She loves Percy very much and is a very kind person. But she is married to a not very kind person, Gabe Ugliano, and Percy calls him Smelly Gabe. He's smelly on the inside and the outside. He is not nice. Percy and his mom go on a little trip to the beach, and there, during a storm, Grover finds them. Well, Grover is not just a regular guy. He is a satyr, which means he has the legs of a goat. Percy's mom, Percy, and Grover race to Camp Half-Blood, and what is following them is a giant monster called the Minotaur. He is a bull with a huge man's body. Terrifying, hard to stop. He grabs Percy's mom, and she disappears in gold dust. Percy defeats him and saves Grover and brings him across the line to Camp Half-Blood. Percy wakes up in Camp Half-Blood, and turns out that his teacher, Mr. Brunner, wasn't just a regular teacher. He is a centaur named Kyrian, and he was checking up on Percy to get him ready to come to Camp Half-Blood. The camp is also run by Dionysus, the god of wine. He doesn't really like his job, but... In chapters 6 and 7, we learn all about Camp Half-Blood. The camp is for demigods, or children who have 1 Greek godparent and 1 mortal parent. They have some special either traits or powers from their godly parents. They stay in the cabin of their godly parent, as you can see our little cabins here. And Percy meets a few friends. Luke from Hermes' cabin and Annabeth from Athena cabin. He also meets some not very close friends from the Ares cabin, Clarice. In chapter 8, they play Capture the Flag, and the Ares cabin gets back at Percy for kind of, embarrassing them. Well, Percy defeats them, and in the meantime is claimed by Poseidon. Percy's father is the god of the sea. In chapter 9, Percy is given a quest. He is going to go on a mission with Annabeth and Grover to the underworld, which is where souls go in this world when they die. It is run by Hades, and they believe that he has stolen the Master Bolt of Zeus. Sounds dangerous. He also has to bring it back all the way to New York City to Mount Olympus, but in 10 days. Whew. In chapter 10, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover go to New York and get on a bus. But also on their bus are the 3 Furies, Hades' most dangerous monsters. One of them was Percy's old math teacher, Mrs. Dodds. They attack, and somehow Percy, Annabeth, and Grover get away. But right when they get off the bus is struck by lightning and explodes. In chapter 11, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover find a place filled with stone statues and turns out to be Medusa's lair. Medusa is a terrifying monster. She can turn you to stone just by looking her in the eyes. Her hair is angry snakes and she is quick. They defeat her, but narrowly. In chapter 12, we learn about Grover and how he cares so much about nature and the world. His mission is to search for the god of the wild, Pan. Also, Grover can talk to animals. He talked to a pink poodle who told them that they could use his reward money for being found to hop on a train and get going to LA. So they get help from a pink poodle. We have our heroes now on the train ready to go. Let's see what happens next in their adventure. Enjoy! Chapter 13. I plunge to my death. We spent 2 days on the Amtrak train, heading west through the hills, over rivers, past amber waves of grain. We weren't attacked once, but I didn't relax. I felt that we were traveling around in a display case, being watched from above and maybe from below, that something was waiting for the right opportunity. I tried to keep a low profile because my name and picture were splattered over the front pages of several East Coast newspapers. The Trenton Register News showed a photo taken by a tourist as I got off of the Greyhound bus. I had a wild look in my eyes. My sword was a metallic blur in my hands. It might have been a baseball bat or a lacrosse stick. The picture's caption read, 12-year-old Percy Jackson wanted for questioning in the Long Island disappearance of his mother 2 weeks ago is shown here fleeing from the bus where he accosted several elderly female passengers. The bus exploded on an East New Jersey roadside shortly after Jackson fled the scene. Based on eyewitness counts, police believe the boy may be traveling with 2 teenage accomplices. His stepfather, Gabe Ugliano, has offered a cash reward for information leading to his capture. Don't worry, Annabeth told me. Mortal police could never find us. But she didn't sound so sure. The rest of the day I spent alternately pacing the length of the train, because I had a really hard time sitting still, or looking out the windows. Once I spotted a family of centaurs galloping across a wheat field, bows at the ready, as they hunted lunch. The little boy centaur, who was the size of a second grader on a pony, caught my eye and waved. I looked around the passenger car, but nobody else had noticed. The adult riders all had their faces buried in laptop computers or magazines. Another time, toward evening, I saw something huge moving through the woods. I could have sworn it was a lion, except that lions don't live in America. And this thing was the size of a Hummer. Its fur glinted gold in the evening light. Then it leapt through the trees and was gone. Our reward money for returning Gladolia the poodle had only been enough to purchase tickets as far as Denver. We couldn't get berths in the sleeper car, so we dozed in our seats. My neck got stiff. I tried not to drool in my sleep, since Annabeth was sitting right next to me. Grover kept snoring and bleating and waking me up. Once he shuffled around and his fake foot fell off. Annabeth and I had to stick it back on before any other passenger noticed. So, Annabeth asked me, once we'd gotten Grover's sneaker readjusted, who wants your help? What do you mean? I asked. When you were asleep just now, you mumbled, I won't help you. Who were you dreaming about? I was reluctant to say anything. It was the second time I dreamed about the evil voice from the pit, but it bothered me so much I finally told her. Annabeth was quiet for a long time. That doesn't sound like Hades. He always appears on a black throne, and he never laughs. He offered my mother in a trade. Who else could do that? I guess if he meant help me raise from the underworld, if he wants war with the Olympians, but why ask you to bring him the Master Bolt if he already has it? I shook my head, wishing I knew the answer. I thought about what Grover had told me, that the Furies on the bus seemed to have been looking for something. "Where is it? Where?" they had said. Maybe Grover sensed my emotions. He snored in his sleep, muttered something about vegetables, and turned his head. Annabeth readjusted his cap so it covered his horns. "Percy, you can't barter with Hades. You know that, right? He's deceitful, heartless, and greedy. I don't care if his kindly ones weren't as aggressive this time." "This time?" I asked. "You mean you've run into them before?" Her hand crept up to her necklace. She fingered a glazed white bead painted with the image of a pine tree. One of her clay end-of-the-summer tokens. "Let's just say I've got no love for the Lord of the Dead. You can't be tempted to make a deal for your mom." "What would you do if it was your dad?" "That's easy," she said. "I'd leave him to rot." "You're not serious." Annabeth's gray eyes fixed on me. She wore the same expression she'd worn in the woods at camp, the moment she drew her sword against the hellhound. "My dad's resented me since the day I was born, Percy," she said. "He never wanted a baby. When he got me, he asked Athena to take me back and raise me on Olympus because he was too busy with his work. She wasn't happy about that. She told him heroes had to be raised by their mortal parent." "But how? I guess you weren't born in a hospital." "I appeared on my father's doorstep in a golden cradle, carried down from Olympus by Zephyr the west wind. You'd think my dad would remember that as a miracle, right? Like maybe take some digital photos or something? But he always talked about my arrival as if it were the most inconvenient thing that had ever happened to him. When I was 5, he got married and totally forgot about Athena. He got a regular mortal life, had 2 regular mortal kids, and tried to pretend I didn't exist." I stared out the train window. The lights of a sleeping town were drifting by. I wanted to make Annabeth feel better, but I didn't know how. "My mom married a really awful guy," I told her. "Grover said she did it to protect me, to hide me in the scent of a human family. Maybe that's what your dad was thinking." Annabeth kept worrying about her necklace. She was pinching the gold college ring that hung with the beads. It occurred to me that the ring must be her father's. I wonder why she wore it if she hated him so much. "He doesn't care about me," she said. "His wife, my stepmom, treated me like a freak. She wouldn't let me play with her children. My dad went along with her. Whenever something dangerous happened, something with monsters, they would both look at me resentfully like, 'How dare you put our family at risk?' Finally, I took the hint. I wasn't wanted, and I ran away." "How old were you?" "Same age when I started camp, 7. "But you couldn't have gotten all the way to Half-Blood Hill by yourself."
"Not alone, no. Athena watched over me, guided me toward help. I made a couple of unexpected friends who took care of me, for a short time anyway."
I wanted to ask what happened, but Annabeth seemed lost in sad memories, so I listened to the sound of Grover snoring and gazed out the train windows at the dark fields of Ohio racing by. Toward the end of our second day on the train, June 13th, 8 days before the summer solstice, we passed through some golden hills over the Mississippi River into St. Louis. Annabeth craned her neck to see the gateway arch, which looked to me like a huge shopping bag handle stuck in the city.
"I want to do that," she sighed.
"What?" I asked.
"Build something like that. You ever see the Parthenon, Percy?"
"Only in pictures."
"Someday I'm going to see it in person. I'm going to build the greatest monument to the gods ever. Something that'll last 1,000 years.
I laughed. "You, an architect?" I don't know why, but I found it funny. Just the idea of Annabeth trying to sit quietly and draw all day. Her cheeks flushed.
"Yes, an architect. Athena expects her children to create things, not just tear them down like a certain god of earthquakes I could mention."
I watched the churning brown water of the Mississippi below.
"Sorry," Annabeth said. "That was mean."
"Can't we work together a little?" I pleaded. Didn't Athena and Poseidon ever cooperate? Annabeth had to think about it.
"I guess the chariot," she said tentatively. "My mom invented it, but Poseidon created horses out of crests of waves. So they had to work together to make it complete."
"Then we can cooperate too, right?" We rode into the city, Annabeth watching as the arch disappeared behind a hotel.
"I suppose,"
she said at last. We pulled into the Amtrak station downtown. The intercom told us that we'd have a 3-hour layover before departing for Denver. Grover stretched. Before he was even fully awake, he said, "Food." "Come on, goat boy," Annabeth said. "Sightseeing." "Sightseeing?" "The Gateway Arch," she said. "This may be my only chance to ride to the top. Are you coming or not?" Grover and I exchanged looks. I wanted to say no, but I figured that if Annabeth was going, we couldn't very well let her go alone. Grover shrugged. "As long as there's a snack bar without monsters." The arch was about a mile from the train station. Late in the day, the lines to get in weren't that long. We threaded our way through the underground museum, looking at covered wagons and other junk from the 1800s. It wasn't at all thrilling, but Annabeth kept telling us interesting facts about how the arch was built, and Grover kept passing me jelly beans, so I was okay. I kept looking around, though, at the other people in line. "You smell anything?" I murmured to Grover. He took his nose out of the jelly bean bag long enough to sniff. "Underground," he said distastefully. "Underground air always smells like monsters. Probably doesn't mean anything." But something felt wrong to me. I had a feeling we shouldn't be here. "Guys," I said, "you know the God's symbols of power?" Annabeth had been in the middle of reading about the construction equipment used to build the arch, but she looked over. "Yeah?" "Well, hey, Grover cleared his throat. "We're in a public place? You mean our friend downstairs?" Right," I said. "Our friend way downstairs. Doesn't he have a hat like Annabeth's?" "You mean the Helm of Darkness?" Annabeth said. "Yeah, that's his symbol of power. I saw it next to his seat during the Winter Solstice Council meeting." "He was there?" I asked. She nodded. "It's the only time he's allowed to visit Olympus, the darkest day of the year. But his helm is a lot more powerful than my invisibility hat. If what I heard is true—" "It allows him to become darkness," Grover confirmed. "He can melt into shadow or pass through walls. He can't be touched or seen or heard. And he can radiate fear so intense it can drive you insane and stop your heart. Why do you think all rational creatures fear the dark?" "But then, how do we know he's not here, right now, watching us?" I asked. Annabeth and Grover exchanged looks. "We don't," Grover said. "Thanks. That makes me feel a lot better," I said. "Got any blue jelly beans left?" I'd almost mastered my jumpy nerves when I saw the tiny little elevator car we were going to ride to the top of the arch in. I knew I was in trouble. I hated confined spaces. They make me nuts. We got shoehorned into a car with a big fat lady and her dog, a chihuahua with a rhinestone collar. I figured maybe the dog was a seeing eye chihuahua because none of the guards said a word about it. We started going up, inside the arch. I'd never even been in an elevator that went in a curve, and my stomach wasn't too happy about it. "No parents?" the fat lady asked us. She had beady eyes, pointy, coffee-stained teeth, a floppy denim hat, and a denim dress that bulged so much she looked like a blue jean blimp. "They're below," Annabeth told her. "Scared of heights." "Oh, poor things." The chihuahua growled. The woman said, Now, Sonny, behave." The dog had beady eyes like its owner, intelligent and vicious. I said, "Sonny, is that his name?" "No," the lady told me. She smiled, as if that cleared everything up. At the top of the arch, the observation deck reminded me of a tin can with carpeting. Rows of tiny windows looked out over the city on one side and the river on the other. The view was okay, but if there's anything I like less than a confined space, it's confined space 600 feet in the air. I was ready to go pretty quick. Annabeth kept talking about structural supports and how she would have made the windows bigger and designed a see-through floor. She probably could have stayed up there for hours, but luckily for me, the park ranger announced that the observation deck would be closing in a few minutes. I steered Grover and Annabeth toward the exit, loaded them into the elevator, and I was about to get myself in when I realized there were already 2 tourists inside. No room for me. The park ranger said, "Next car, sir." "We'll get out," Annabeth said. "We'll wait with you." But that was going to mess everybody up and take even more time. So I said, nah, it's okay. I'll see you guys at the bottom. Grover and Annabeth both looked nervous, but they let the elevator door slide shut. Their car disappeared down the ramp. Now the only people left in the observation deck were me, a little boy with his parents, the park ranger, and the fat lady with her chihuahua. I smiled uneasily at the fat lady. She smiled back, her forked tongue flicking between her teeth. Wait a minute. Forked tongue? Before I could decide if I'd really seen that, her chihuahua jumped down and started yapping at me. Now, Sonny, the lady said. Does this look like a good time? We have all these nice people here. Doggy, said the little boy. Look, a doggy. His parents pulled him back. The chihuahua bared its teeth at me, foam dripping from his black lips. Well, son, the fat lady sighed, if you insist. Ice started forming in my stomach. Did you call that chihuahua your son? Chimera, dear, the fat lady corrected. Not a chihuahua. It's an easy mistake to make. She rolled up her denim sleeves, revealing the skin of her arms was scaly and green. When she smiled, I saw that her teeth were fangs. The pupils of her eyes were sideways slits, like a reptile's. The chihuahua barked louder, and with each bark it grew. First to the size of a Doberman, then to a lion. The bark became a roar. The little boy screamed. His parents pulled him back toward the exit, straight into the park ranger, who stood paralyzed, gaping at the monster. The chimera, now so tall its back rubbed against the roof. It had the head of a lion with a blood-caked mane, the body and hooves of a giant goat, and the serpent for a tail, a 10-foot-long diamondback growing right out of its shaggy behind. The rhinestone dog collar still hung around its neck. The plate-sized dog tag was now easy to read. Chimera. Rabid, fire-breathing, poisonous. If found, please call Tartarus. Extension 954. I realized I hadn't even uncapped my sword. My hands were numb. I was 10 feet away from the chimera's bloody maw, and I knew that as soon as I moved, the creature would lunge. The snake lady made a hissing noise that might have been laughter. Be honored, Percy Jackson. Lord Zeus rarely allows me to test a hero with one of my brood. For I am the mother of monsters, the terrible Echidna. I stared at her. All I could think to say was, isn't that a kind of anteater? She howled, her reptilian face turning brown and green with rage. I hate it when people say that. I hate Australia, naming that ridiculous animal after me. For that, Percy Jackson, my son shall destroy you. The chimera charged, its lion teeth gnashing. I managed to leap aside to dodge the bite. I ended up next to the family and the park ranger, who were all screaming now, trying to pry open the emergency exit doors. I couldn't let them get hurt. I uncapped my sword, ran to the other side of the deck, and yelled, Hey, Chihuahua! The chimera turned faster than I couldn't have believed possible. Before I swung my sword, it opened its mouth, emitting a stench like the world's largest barbecue pit, and shot a column of flame straight at me. I dove through the explosion. The carpet burst into flames, the heat so intense it nearly seared off my eyebrows. Where I had been standing a moment before was a ragged hole in the side of the arch, with a melted metal steaming around the edges. Great, I thought. We just blowtorched a national monument. Riptide was now a shining bronze blade in my hands, and as the chimera turned, I slashed at its neck. That was my fatal mistake. The blade sparked harmlessly off the dog collar. I tried to regain my balance, but I was so worried about defending myself against the fiery lion's mouth, I completely forgot about the serpent's tail until it whipped around and sank its fangs into my calf. My whole leg was on fire. I tried to jab Riptide into the chimera's mouth, but the serpent tail wrapped around my ankles and pulled me off balance, and my blade flew out of my hand, spinning out of the hole in the arch down toward the Mississippi River. I managed to get to my feet, but I knew I had lost. I was weaponless.
I could feel deadly poison racing up to my chest. I remembered Kyrian saying that Anaklusmos would always return to me, but there was no pen in my pocket. Maybe it had fallen too far away. Maybe it only returned when it was in pen form. I didn't know. And I wasn't going to live long enough to figure it out. I backed into the hole in the wall. The Chimera advanced, growling, smoke curling from its lips. The snake lady, Enchidina, cackled. They don't make heroes like they used to, eh, son? The monster growled. It seemed in no hurry to finish me off now that I was beaten. I glanced at the park ranger and the family. The little boy was hiding behind his father's legs. I had to protect these people. I couldn't just die. I tried to think, but my whole body was on fire. My head felt dizzy. I had no sword, and I was facing a massive, fire-breathing monster and its mother, and I was scared. There was no place else to go, so I stepped to the edge of the hole. Far, far below, the river glittered. If I died, would the monsters go away? Would they leave the humans alone? If you're the son of Poseidon, Echidna hissed, you should not fear the water. Jump, Percy Jackson. Show me that water will not harm you. Jump and retrieve your sword. Prove your bloodline. Yeah, right, I thought. I'd read somewhere that jumping into water from a couple stories up was like jumping into solid asphalt. From here, I'd splatter on impact. The Chimera's mouth glowed red, heating up for another blast. You have no faith, Echidna told me. You do not trust the gods. I cannot blame you, little coward. Better you die now. The gods are faithless. The poison is in your heart. She was right. I was dying. I could feel my breath slowing down. Nobody could save me, not even the gods. I backed up and looked down at the water. I remembered the warm glow of my father's smile when I was a baby. He must have seen me. He must have visited me when I was in my cradle. I remembered the swirling green trident that appeared above my head the night of Capture the Flag, when Poseidon had claimed me as his son. But this wasn't the sea. This was the Mississippi, dead center of the USA. There was no sea god here. Die, faithless one, Echidna rasped, and the Chimera sent a column of flame toward my face. Father, help me, I prayed. I turned and jumped. My clothes on fire, poison coursing through my veins, I plummeted toward the river. Chapter 14. I become a known fugitive. I'd love to tell you I had some deep revelation on my way down, that I came to terms with my own mortality, laughed in the face of death, etc. The truth, my only thought was, ah! The river raced toward me at a speed of a truck. Wind ripped the breath from my lungs. Steeples and skyscrapers and bridges tumbled in and out of my vision. And then, flaboom! A whiteout of bubbles. I sank through the murk, sure that I was about to end up embedded in 100 feet of mud and lost forever. But my impact with the water hadn't hurt. I was falling slowly now, bubbles trickling up through my fingers. I settled on the river bottom soundlessly. A catfish the size of my stepfather lurked away into the gloom. Clouds of silt and disgusting garbage, beer bottles, old shoes, plastic bags, swirled up all around me. At that point, I realized a few things. First, I had not been flattened into a pancake. I had not been barbecued. I couldn't even feel the Chimera's poison boiling in my veins anymore. I was alive, which was good. Second realization, I wasn't wet. I mean, I could feel the coldness of the water. I could see where the fire on my clothes had been quenched. But then I touched my own shirt, and it felt perfectly dry. I looked at the garbage floating by and snatched an old cigarette lighter. No way, I thought. I flicked the lighter. It sparked. A tiny flame appeared, right at the bottom of the Mississippi. I grabbed a soggy hamburger wrapper out of the current, and immediately the paper turned dry. I lit it with no problem. As soon as I let it go, the flame sputtered out. The wrapper turned back into a slimy rag. Weird. But the strangest thought occurred to me only last. I was breathing. I was underwater, and I was breathing normally. I stood up, thigh deep in the mud. My legs felt shaky. My hands trembled. I should have been dead. The fact that I wasn't seemed like, well, a miracle. I imagined a woman's voice, a voice that sounded a bit like my mother. "Percy, what do you say?" Thanks. Underwater, I sounded like I did on recordings, like a much older kid. "Thank you, Father." No response, just the dark drift of garbage downriver, the enormous catfish gliding by, the flash of sunset on the water's surface far above. Why had Poseidon saved me? The more I thought about it, the more ashamed I felt. So I'd gotten lucky a few times before. Against a thing like the Chimera, I had never stood a chance. Those poor people in the arch were probably toast. I couldn't protect them. I was no hero. Maybe I should just stay down here with the catfish. Join the bottom feeders. Thump, thump, thump. A riverboat's paddle wheel churned above me, swirling the silt around. There, not 5 feet in front of me, was my sword, its gleaming bronze hilt sticking up in the mud. I heard that woman's voice again. "Percy, take the sword. Your father believes in you." This time I knew the voice wasn't in my head. I wasn't imagining it. Her words seemed to come from everywhere, rippling through the water like dolphin sonar. "Where are you?" I called aloud. Then, through the gloom, I saw her. A woman the color of the water, a ghost in the current, floating just above the sword. She had long, billowing hair, and her eyes, barely visible, were green like mine. A lump formed in my throat. I said, "Mom?" "No, child," she said. "Only a messenger, though your mother's fate is not as hopeless as you believe. Go to the beach in Santa Monica." "What?" "It's your father's will. Before you descend into the underworld, you must go to Santa Monica. Please, Percy, I cannot stay long. The river here is far too foul for my presence." "But—" I was sure this woman was my mother, or a vision of her anyway. How did... There was so much I wanted to ask. The words got jammed in my throat. "I cannot stay, brave one," the woman said. She reached out, and I felt the current brush my face like a caress. "You must go to Santa Monica. And Percy, do not trust the gifts." Her voice faded. "Gifts?" I asked. "What gifts? Wait!" She made one more attempt to speak, but the sound was gone. Her image melted away. If it was my mother, I had lost her again. I felt like drowning myself. Only problem, I was immune to drowning. "Your father believes in you," she had said. She also called me brave, unless she was talking to the catfish. I waded toward Riptide and grabbed it by the hilt. The Chimera might still be up there with its snaky, fat mother, waiting to finish me off. At the very least, the mortal police would be arriving, trying to figure out who had blown a hole in the arch. If they found me, they'd have some questions. I capped my sword, stuck the ballpoint pen in my pocket. "Thank you, Father," I said again to the dark water. Then I kicked up through the muck and swam for the surface. I came ashore next to the floating McDonald's. A block away, every emergency vehicle in St. Louis was surrounding the arch. Police helicopters circled overhead. The crowd of onlookers reminded me of Times Square on New Year's Eve. A little girl said, "Mama, that boy just walked out of the river." "That's nice, dear," her mother said, craning her neck to watch the ambulances. "But he's dry." "That's nice, dear." A news lady was talking for the camera. "Probably not a terrorist attack, we're told, but it's still very early in the investigation. The damage, as you can see, is very serious. We're trying to get some of the survivors to question them about the eyewitness reports of someone falling from the arch." Survivors. I felt a surge of relief. Maybe the park ranger and that family made it out safely. I hoped Annabeth and Grover were okay. I tried to push through the crowd to see what was going on inside the police line. "An adolescent boy," another reporter was saying. "Channel 5 has learned that the surveillance camera showed an adolescent boy going wild on the observation deck, somehow setting off this freak explosion. Hard to believe, John, but that's what we're hearing. Again, no confirmed fatalities. I backed away, trying to keep my head down. I had to go a long way around the police perimeter. Uniformed soldiers and news reporters were everywhere. I'd lost hope of finding Annabeth and Grover when I heard a familiar voice bleating, "Percy!" I turned around and got tackled by Grover's bear hug, or goat hug. He said, "We thought you'd gone to Hades the hard way." Annabeth stood behind him, trying to look angry, but even she seemed relieved to see me. "We can't leave you alone for 5 minutes. What happened?" I sort of fell. "Percy, that's 630 feet." Behind us, a cop shouted, "Gangway!" The crowd parted and a couple of paramedics hustled out, rolling a woman on a stretcher. I recognized her immediately as the mother of the little boy who'd been on the observation deck. She was saying, "And then this huge dog, this huge fire-breathing chihuahua?" "It's okay, ma'am," the paramedic said. "Just calm down. Your family is fine. The medication is starting to kick in." "I'm not crazy! This boy jumped out of the hole and the monster disappeared." And then she saw me. "There he is! That's the boy!" I turned quickly and pulled Annabeth and Grover after me. We disappeared into the crowd. "What's going on?" Annabeth demanded. "Was she talking about the chihuahua on the elevator?" I told them the whole story of the Chimera, Echidna, my high dive act, and the underwater lady's message. "Whoa," said Grover. "We've got to get you to Santa Monica. You can't ignore a summons from your dad." Before Annabeth could respond, we passed another reporter doing a news break, and I almost froze in my tracks when he said, "Percy Jackson. That's right, Dan. Channel 12 has learned that the boy who may have caused this explosion fits the description of a young man wanted by authorities for serious New Jersey bus accident 3 days ago, and the boy is believed to be traveling west. For our viewers at home, here's a photo of Percy Jackson." We ducked around the news van and slipped into the alley. "First things first," I told Grover. "We've got to get out of town." Somehow, we made it back to the Amtrak station without getting spotted. We got on board the train just before it pulled out for Denver. The train trundled west as darkness fell, police lights still pulsing against the St. Louis skyline behind us. So, that was chapters 13 and 14. A lot happened in those chapters. But first, let's go through our map. Where have our heroes now gone? We started over here at Camp Half-Blood in New York, and then went to New York City, and then to New Jersey, to Auntie M's Gnome Emporium. And now they have hitched a ride, and they made it to St. Louis. How many of you guys have been to St. Louis? Or driven past the arch? It's pretty cool. Well, Percy blew a hole in the side of it. Ugh. And they still have a long way to go. But they have made it at least to the middle of the country. That's good. So in the first chapter that we read, chapter 13, I plunge to my death. Ooh. Why does Percy try to keep a low profile while they're on the train? First off, what's a low profile? It means he's not trying to stand out. It means he is trying to blend in. Maybe people don't look at him. Keeps his hood up. He's trying to keep a low profile because he is now all over the newspapers. Gabe, Smelly Gabe, his stepdad, is blaming him for his mother's disappearance and lots of other things. They now blame him for the bus exploding. It's not good. What new information does Annabeth tell about her father in this chapter? So we learn a little bit that Annabeth and her dad do not get along. Annabeth feels that she's not really wanted at her house. I mean, monsters follow her. They say that she scares her stepbrothers, but I don't know. She doesn't feel like she's wanted. Her dad is a history major and wasn't exactly prepared for a kid at the time. What magic item does Hades have? So we talked a little about this.
Hades is the lord of the underworld. And his magical item is called a helm of darkness. So a helm is like a helmet that they wear in old Greek times. And he can turn invisible and blend into the shadows. He can sneak up on people. It's very scary. Describe the Chimera. So the Chimera is a scary monster that we run into, isn't it? What traits does it have? Well, it started off as a Chihuahua, which is a very small dog, right? It did not end up as a Chihuahua, did it? So Chimera, here's our picture, has the body of the head of a lion. The body has some goat legs back here. Look at its hooves. And look, its tail is a giant snake. It's not a regular lion's tail. It's a snake. And then his mother, right there, she has green scaly arms. Her eyes are like reptiles. And she has pointy teeth. Ooh. Ooh. Why does Echidna, which is the Chimera's mom, the bad lady, say that Percy should feel honored to be killed by her? So what did she say she was? The mother of all monsters. Ugh. So she helped create all of these monsters. And apparently she's not let out of her cage very often. What is Percy's fatal mistake when he's battling the Chimera? So what is his fatal mistake? Well, I think he had two kind of big mistakes. First, he cut right where the giant dog collar was, so he didn't really hit anything. And then what did he forget about? The snake, who has poisonous venom. It bit him on the leg. Eesh. Why does Percy decide he has no choice but to jump? Well, one thing we didn't talk about yet was what comes out of the lion's mouth. Do you remember? It breathes fire. As if there aren't enough problems with this animal. It breathes fire. And it shot a hole through the side of the arch. So Percy decides to jump. He lost his sword. There are innocent people in the arch with him, and he doesn't want them to get hurt. He hopes that the monster will just go away after he goes. And he has poison in his veins, so he kind of feels like he's already really hurt. How do you think the battle might have gone differently if there weren't any mortals? So if that family and the park ranger weren't in the arch with Percy? I think he might have tried a little bit harder to take maybe the Chimera with him when he fell, or he might attack a little bit more, wait for his pen to come back to his pocket, his sword. But he needed to protect them, and so he was really thinking about them rather than the tail that bit him. All right, so now we are on chapter 14. I plunge to my death. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. Was the first one. Chapter 14 is I become a known fugitive. So when Percy lands in the Mississippi River, what are the things that he realizes that amaze him? There are a lot of things. He realizes, well, he's no longer on fire. That's good. He feels so much better in the water. It's making the poison just go away. His clothes are dry. And finally, he's breathing normally under the water. No regular person could do that at all. But since he is the son of the sea god, he can breathe underwater. Pretty cool. Why does Percy feel a bit ashamed that Poseidon, his father, saved him? Well, he thought he was going to smack that water and be done for. He didn't have faith that Poseidon was listening or even cared, did he? He didn't think he was going to get saved. So he feels a little guilty when he does get saved. What message does the woman in the water bring to Percy? And then a warning. So she's really hard to hear and kind of hard to see. But I think this image is really cool. So she brings a message. She says, "Come to Santa Monica Pier." And then her warning is, "Don't trust the gifts." That's worrisome. What does Percy learn by overhearing the reports outside the arch? Well, he learns that no one died, so the other people who were in the arch with him are fine. They are okay. And that they now saw Percy and think that he did it. Ugh, oh boy. Well, our heroes have now jumped back onto the train and are on their way to Denver, Colorado. Let's see if they have a little bit more luck there than they did in St. Louis. I hope you enjoyed these chapters, and we'll see you guys with our next chapter book read-along of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. Bye, everyone!